Hi, my name is Yishis, and I play an engineer on the Blackgate server. Today I'll be presenting some Outnumbered engineer gameplay that I've recorded in the past month. The majority of these clips will be on a condition build, and my gear and spec information can be found in the description below. In this first fight, I find myself being chased by 3 thieves in the same guild. I manage to kite them to the windmill and pull one out and drop him with very heavy confusion damage. I immediately take a Basilisk Venom, but manage to get off a big old bomb to gain breathing room and then follow with my crate in order to stun them all and keep AoE pressure while gaining some valuable heal kits. I keep focus on the downed thief in order to drop him, and focus on AoE abilities to continue to pressure the other thieves that are engaging. Since the thieves are so persistent on front-loading melee damage, I feel confident that I can just drop passive bomb damage and absorb the rest of the damage with my shield block and blinds in order to ultimately dispatch of the 2 remaining thieves. This clip truly demonstrates the sheer power of AoE condition damage that engineers can stack and pressure with while remaining very defensive. Ultimately, I have a very strong zone of control around myself while I'm weaker to range in general. Because these thieves engaged so heavily in melee, it gave me a very strong advantage to conquer the fight. Next up, we'll take on a warrior and thief and utilize smoke bomb with blast finishers to gain a stealth opening. I expect the thief to apply the most pressure, so I turn and engage on her with a magnet pull followed by crowbar. Seeing the enemies lined up at close range, I use blowtorch to apply extremely long burning durations and follow with a crate to keep them locked down. At this point, the enemies have a window to engage, so I drop bombs in order to keep zone control while they try to get melee pressure on me. The thief briefly ducks out to drop conditions, so I use this time to heal up and apply more burning with my Balthazar runes. As both enemies re-engage in melee, I drop bombs to get strong AoE zone control damage on them and block in order to absorb their damage. At this point, both enemies are too heavily stacked with conditions. The warrior has taken off to try and drop them, and the thief has managed to fall. As I finish off the thief with raw damage, I see the warrior running away at low health. In order to catch him, I switch to my elixir gun, knock myself back with number 4, switch to toolkit and pull him, then finish him off with crowbar. This demonstrates some of the great utility of the elixir gun, as the number 4 ability is not just raw damage or knockback, but is most often used for self-propulsion in order to catch fleeing enemies or let yourself escape. Make good use of the about face hotkey and you've got yourself a mini rocket boots, though keep in mind it doesn't clear conditions. In the next fight, I find myself engaged on by an entire guild group and make liberal use of kiting in order to take out as many of these enemies as I can. Initially, I'm engaged on by a Mesmer and warrior and open immediately on the Mesmer with a pull, crowbar, and confusion stacks. I then find myself caught out in the open with not much cover, so I drop a chill grenade and then my crate in order to lock down the enemies with crowd control and then keep heavy pressure on the Mesmer that I've got quite low. As she pulls up the hill, I stay close to her with grenade pressure and use my elixir gun number 3 in order to poison her to reduce any heal she might try to use. As she drops, I keep grenade pressure and continue to kite the warrior around. At this point, her death has enraged the warrior and he enters into rampage mode, but I want to keep pressure on the Mesmer to fully take her down and make it much harder for her to be revived. Unfortunately, the pressure from the rampage warrior is very strong as I can't do much to crowd control him with his reduced condition durations in that form. At the same time, a third enemy, a Mesmer, enters the fight and applies more pressure and crippling. I do manage to take down the first Mesmer, however, and also manage to take down the warrior with my condition damage while knocking myself back and getting a blast finisher heal. At this point, I'm left with very low health and no heals, so I don't want to risk engaging on the downed warrior as I'm unsure if the Mesmer may burst me. In the end, this turns out to be the wrong decision as the Mesmer just uses mass invisibility to revive the warrior. By the time I've managed to restore my health, the warrior is fully revived and I need to engage him behind the windmill. Unfortunately, this gives time for the Mesmer to revive the fully downed Mesmer that I had already killed. Regardless, my baiting tactic on the warrior works very well and I'm able to take him fully down again. I go for a stomp, manage to fail at my shield block, get interrupted, and do manage to fully stomp him. From here I head back towards the Mesmers, hoping I can still catch them weak from reviving. I open on the first Mesmer I see, get an immobilize on her, and then land strong condition damage into her. I'm unsure exactly where the other Mesmer went to, so I use a bit of caution when engaging this Mesmer. I decide to kite back and get the conditions off of me, and then notice that the other Mesmer is now engaging as well. I stay around this corner for line of sight, drop an elixir gun for sustained healing, and then pull the Mesmer into my trap and get strong condition damage on her. While I manage to avoid one Phantasmal Berserker, the other Mesmer gets one on me and I take a cripple and am forced to tank the damage with a shield block. My goal at this point is to get around the corner of this windmill to continue to line of sight the enemies while keeping strong AoE damage pressure on the tail of me so that they take damage while they continue to chase. I pull up the windmill as it's a very narrow space, and if I can bait the Mesmers up to this spot, I can get really strong AoE condition damage onto both of them. This is quite a success as I'm able to sink a blowtorch, immobilize, and various condition damage into the enemies, though I notice my health is far too low, and I also missed one of my chill grenades, so I need to continue to kite as I can't engage the enemies with that low of health. While kiting, I'm a bit confused as I didn't expect the two Mesmers I just fought to chase that quickly. However, I then noticed that it's a third Mesmer and a Surin Mesmer. I make use of my Elixir Gun knockback and Blast Finisher to get a heal, and then continue to sustain with grenades in order to pressure the enemy, then pull him in with my toolkit unexpectedly, crowbar him, and get extremely strong burning and condition damage into him. At this point, the Mesmer heals and stealths, and I'm leery of where he went to and also where the other enemies went to, so I decide to pull back up the windmill to gain a vantage point. I decide it's best to ultimately keep my distance and keep damage pressure with grenades. Sure enough, one of the other Mesmers reappears and I'm able to get a good blind and confusion stack into both of them to keep damage pressure up. At this point, the third Mesmer appears as well, and I can expect that all three are going to try to engage me. However, I have the advantage in this small, tight area, and I'm able to drop my crate to stun them all and get a strong blowtorch for great AoE damage, then follow up with a block to tank them while I continue to pressure them. During this time, the Asuran Mesmer is behind me, stunning me and doing damage, and the other two Mesmers are up top. However, I manage to take one down, and the other Mesmer jumps off at this point. From here, I'd like to hold this position while making sure I fully dispatch of this Mesmer for a second time. I feel pretty confident engaging the two Mesmers in this tight area for a second time, so I stay up here hoping I can pull them in. However, instead of just the Mesmers, I also get a warrior, and am back to engaging all three enemies at once. This is too much pressure and crowd control for me to handle in this tight area, so I have to block in order to tank the damage, and then jump down and begin to kite with the box of nails, and then continue to drop grenades and heal up. I'm hoping to keep enough AoE damage pressure on these enemies to at least take down one more enemy before I get overwhelmed. Luckily, I noticed that the Asuran Mesmer is extremely low, so I manage a pull and then crowbar to fully finish him off. However, I get knocked down by the warrior and now get engaged on by a fourth enemy, a condition thief. I see that I've got the Asuran Mesmer down, so I try to get a little more condition damage on him. However, I'm very concerned about the very heavy melee damage I'm now taking. I decide in order to survive, I'm going to need to engage full kiting tactics again, so I do as much crowd control as I can to the warrior, then pull out my Elixir Gun and again knock myself back to begin kiting. I use Elixir Gun 5 to clear my condition and gain some good sustain, however then get cut off by one of the other Mesmers and charged by the warrior, which severely hinders my kiting. I'm forced now to block in order to tank the warrior's damage and then have to use my heal, but don't have too many tools left. Next, the thief reveals his true identity. I had originally thought he was a melee thief like most, however he instead applies 5 stacks of confusion and a bunch of bleeds, and this completely shuts me down. In order to kite effectively, I need to be constantly swapping kits and using abilities, so when I get stacked with confusion like that, it's a very quick death and stops my kiting in its tracks. Moments later, I return to the same area and find the same guild building a golem in the camp. I throw some grenades in order to taunt them and again try and re-engage the fight. I figure this is probably a death wish if the condition thief is around again, but I decide to try my luck and manage to initially pull the warrior and a Mesmer. The warrior manages to evade my pull and thus my crowbar misses, however I manage to immobilize him with my pistol number 5 and get some decent condition damage in with my grenades. I'm attempting to kite the warrior while staying just out of the Mesmer's range to reduce his damage, however he does get in range and starts dropping a ton of phantasms, so I'm forced to kite further and pull around the windmill for line of sight. I manage to surprise the warrior with a crate and he drops the conditions, however I then see that the whole guild has returned to chase me, so I engage full-on kiting with grenades. Again, I hope to pull up the windmill and make good use of the tight space to try and do as much damage to these enemies as I can before they overwhelm me. However, I notice that most of the enemies stayed below, and I also see that the warrior never got revived and is still slowly dying to my crates, so I decide to go finish him off. As I round the corner, the warrior uses vengeance, which basically means I've guaranteed a kill on him, and I just need to survive his short burst of damage until he fully falls over and dies. However, I then come face to face with the condition thief and decide I immediately need to get out of line of sight as I can't tank both him and the warrior at the same time. The warrior does fully die, however I then get opened on by the thief, so I pull him in and get a crowbar. Unfortunately, I get heavily stacked with conditions and am forced to just hunker down and block to avoid killing myself with confusion damage. The thief doesn't let up and opens again, however luckily my inventions trait resets my heal and I'm able to regain health and cure conditions to pull back and gain range. At this point I want to make effective use of line of sight and I stay in my elixir heal to gain the most sustain. However, from here I end up unable to find the thief again and it seems the entire guild has pulled out and moved on to something else. Regardless, I think that conditioned thief probably would have had a fair chance to destroy me. In the next fight I'll take on a warrior and sword dagger thief. My opening target is of course the thief, as I again expect him to apply the most burst, however unfortunately my pull gets completely blocked by the trees. Regardless, I get good poison and blowtorch damage into the thief and then immediately follow with a crate to lock them down. I see the warrior caught in immobilize and get a crowbar into him for confusion damage, then return to the thief and get locked down by both enemies, so block to tank the damage. The thief now shadow steps away to retreat, so I use this time to heal up and get more burn damage into the warrior. He then gets caught and immobilized, so I capitalize on this to get blowtorch and poison damage into him, which eventually takes him down. As I move in to finish off the warrior, the thief follows with a shadow refuge, which prevents my stomp. Thus, I switch my tactics to applying heavy AoE damage to the area of the warrior, hoping to pressure both enemies at once. I take a knockdown and I'm starting to feel the melee pressure, so I switch to my toolkit to tank it, then heal up and apply good burning pressure to the warrior. I further pressure with Confusion and Blind, and then manage to get an Immobilize on the thief. I have a feeling the warrior will fall soon, so I decide to stealth with Elixir S and then move in for an eventual stomp on the warrior. However, I see an opportunity to pull the thief and take it and launch with a crowbar and then get strong pressure into him. My plan at this point is I figure I can just damage down the warrior as long as I don't take out any of the mobs which would rally him. Sadly, with a sliver of health, the warrior uses Vengeance and gets up just in time to fully revive the thief. Regardless, this means I've got a guaranteed kill on the warrior and just need to avoid his damage and now engage on the thief one more time. I figure the thief is going to engage on top of me, so I drop a preemptive Immobilize and then continue pressure, try to blowtorch, but he manages to evade it and then uses several shadow steps to try and juke around me. As he engages with an Immobilize, I switch to block so that he can waste some of his initiative, then get a good crowbar followed by a blind and more confusion and some good poison damage, which extremely pressures him, then finish further with a heal, which also gets additional burning, and at this point he goes into a shadow refuge but falls to the condition damage on my grenades. I'm keeping an eye on where I move and when I get blinded in order to sense where this enemy is, since he has a trait that blinds when you get near him and he's in stealth. This allows me to keep pressure on him and eventually finish him with a cool stomp animation. For the next fight, I engage a Guardian and Thief, and I'm running the Celestial Rifle build, which is another popular and very powerful build that I enjoy running just as equally as the Condition build. I open with a long-range chill grenade to slow them down and then manage to get a pull followed by a crowbar into the thief and then knock him back to crowd control him and then begin to kite with grenades for great damage and further crowd lockdown. Using the poison field I've laid down, I use my elixir gun knockback to gain distance and also apply area weakness to both enemies. From here I continue to kite and apply damage pressure and crowd control with grenades while looking for an opening to burst one of the enemies. I get opened on by the thief with Basilisk Venom, try to block it with my toolkit, but then get ringed in by the Guardian. Unfortunately, I make a mistake here as I didn't notice just how low the thief was. I should have chased him. I instead try to pull him but get knocked down by the damn cat and then decide to fully switch my focus to the Guardian while the thief returns to the fight. I go for a pull on the thief and get a good crowbar into him, then block some of the damage, but then notice that the Guardian was actually nearly dead and manages to get a full heal on himself using his elite. Instead, I decide to keep my pressure on the thief, however he then heals up, so I go for a crate, but then take an inconvenient interrupt from the Guardian's elite form. From here I just sustain damage with Box of Nails and a frontal blast from my elite, then follow up with a crate which does extreme pressure to both enemies, especially the thief. I use Elixir Gun number 5 to clear the Immobilize I took, then Elixir Gun number 4 to fully finish off the thief, knock him back in order to interrupt the res, then try to pull the Guardian to further interrupt. However, he evades it, but I'm able to sustain very heavy pressure with grenades and fully interrupt the revive and shut down both enemies, eventually finishing off the Guardian as well. The Celestial build has great juggling capabilities, and it's really fun to play because all of your abilities are useful no matter whether they're primarily power-based or condition-based or both. Finally, for the last fight, I will return to my condition build utilizing bombs, and I'll take on a thief, a guardian, and an up-leveled thief. Be aware that partly through this fight, the thief I'm currently fighting ends up disengaging and taking off. So for the remainder of this fight, I'm just going to talk through some of what I've been up to and why I'm excited for the future of Guild Wars 2. Personally, I've continued to play Guild Wars, however passively, and while I did go try Arcade and WildStar and various other games that came out on the market, Guild Wars continues to be far above and beyond those games with its great dynamic content, awesome story, and truly amazing combat system. I've been having a blast with all builds on Engineer, both Condition and Celestial, and I've been playing a lot of both structured PvP as well as World v World. For structured PvP, I've tended to prefer the Celestial build as I really like the utility and point control that it offers. In World vs. World, I enjoy Celestial, but I tend to find that pure condition damage is more powerful as I really like the raw AoE power and quick casting abilities of the pistols, bombs, and grenades. Conditions in general just tend to lend themselves better to the outnumbered situations I find myself in. So, in general, for those that are curious, is Guild Wars 2 worth coming back to for the expansion? Is there any PvP? Is PvP alive? Is World v World alive? The answer to all of it is yes. The game is still excellent. It's still top of the market. The expansion is going to be great. I look forward to Stronghold. I look forward to the tournaments. I think in general, the PvP is only going upward in this game, and the combat is really there to support it. So I'm truly excited for it, and I definitely urge everybody that's interested to come back and give it a shot. So with that, thank you all for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in Heart of Thorns.